Okay. And now I'm going to just have a few slides just to keep me on track because it's such a big topic. I want to try to make sure I'm coherent. And please just kind of just stop me at some point, unmute and say, stop right there. Just say a little more about that or whatever. So let me do that. Okay. So let me just start the slideshow. Okay. Let me share my screen. What I plan on doing is sending everybody who's on, because you registered, a copy of the slides. I'll try to get them posted also. And also, there's going to be links that I'll send out. And I'll just, rather than trying to cut and paste them in the chat right now, I will send you all by the end of the day the links so you have them. Okay, so I'm Archdeacon Diane Riley. I'm a vocational deacon in the diocese. And vocational deacons, just to make a plug, are people who bridge the gap between the world and the church and the world. And we have a justice focus and a pastoral care focus, I would say, care for the community, care for people. So most deacons are assigned to a church, but they don't get paid by the church. And therefore most deacons work in the world, and they view their work as a continuation of their ministry, as really as a part of their ministry. I'm executive director of the Supportive Housing Association of New Jersey. It's a nonprofit association. Our members are organizations that provide supportive housing, and supportive housing is affordable housing with services for people with disabilities or barriers. So it's a little more complicated than affordable housing, but it is definitely for people with low income, and is definitely part of the housing world and the issues that surround housing and surround stigma and exclusion. So that is why I'm involved with this issue. And I'm really involved in that. I testified yesterday on the legislation that I'm going to talk about today. So it's exciting what's going on. We should be very proud that we live in New Jersey. Honestly, we really should. I don't think I have to say why housing is important and why we should all care as people of faith about housing. I believe housing is a right, that people have a right to live in homes that are safe and affordable. And I think as people of faith, we believe in justice, and we believe in everybody's right to have the same opportunities and share the same burdens as each other. So we'll go, and we all live in a town. And so here we are, we have a place in this discussion. So let me talk just a little bit about the history of affordable housing and how we got here. So, as part of the Great Migration, and if you've done a lot of the racial work, that's the wonderful racial work that has been going on in the diocese, that people moved up from the South because of the racial issues that were going on down there and the terrible racial conditions, and they moved up north. And as they moved up north, obviously, people here had to deal with changing towns, changing patterns, a lot of people moving in, and people have fears, and that was challenging. That was really, really, really challenging. And we tried to deal with racism in the nation. We struck down a number of explicit racial practices, but that doesn't mean that there are other practices that bubble up, right? So you hit it's like a whack-a-mole. You hit one thing, and other practices bubble up that have the same effect. And some of the practices that bubbled up was exclusionary zoning practices, land use practices that had the effect of really closing people out of living in certain areas. So even though that explicit racial practices were outlawed, we had the zoning practices that limited the size of and the type of housing that could be built. So if you're only building single family housing, that means you have to have the ability to afford single family housing. You have to have the ability to get a mortgage and all of the above. And because we adopted those exclusionary practices, we in effect shut people out of living in different neighborhoods in the nation and certainly in New Jersey. And the Supreme Court upheld those practices. Honestly, they did. And so what it meant was that people were locked out, and you had a lot of other practices like that led to redlining, people being locked out of certain communities. So really what happened was that really only if you had the means and were not a person of color and really truly not even Jewish, you could live where you wanted to live, right? So in effect, we had a lot of segregation anyway. In the 70s in New Jersey, there was a community, Mount Laurel. You've heard of the Mount Laurel Doctrine, I'm sure, and it actually is a town in New Jersey. And it was a rural town, and it had a fair amount of African American people living there that were farmers and sharecroppers. And in the 70s, what happened is that people in Camden and Philly started moving into Mount Laurel, right? So there was a lot of people coming out, white flight, right? And it really started changing the ability for people who lived there for generations to continue to live there. And towns really, and the town, instead of helping people maintain their housing and continue to live there, they tried to push them out. So much so that a woman called Ethel Lawrence, God bless her soul, who was a sixth generation resident of Mount Laurel, got a lot of groups together and basically sued the town. And there was a lawyer that was involved there that became the founder of Fair Share Housing today, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But in the 1970s, she sued. And there were other lawsuits that came about. The United Auto Workers challenge, I'm mentioning this, challenged the zoning in Mahwah, right in our own backyard, that excluded workers from the Ford plant from living nearby. So it wasn't just down in the southern part of the state in Mount Laurel, it was everywhere that this started happening. And, you know, I'm not going to say that the civil rights movement didn't have a place in this sort of consciousness of people trying to do this. But in 1975, the New Jersey Supreme Court sided with Ethel Lawrence, and the communities that had organized alongside her, holding
bathroom.
Okay, let me just
Get my stuff for the bank and then go to Shaquana's house.
Can you
It's 12:45.
Okay, so the New Jersey Supreme Court sided with Ethel, which was great. And this is what they said, and this has a lot of implications because it's the basis of the Mount Laurel doctrine and all of the benefits we've been able to accomplish and the great strides in policy in New Jersey. This is what they said. All New Jersey municipalities are responsible for providing their fair share of affordable housing, both to create new affordable homes and rehabilitate existing substandard homes occupied by lower income families. And that's what it was. And that is the Supreme Court decision that really upholds all of the things we've been able to do. It's pretty exciting. In 1985, the Fair Housing Act was passed and signed into law, and it took all of that Supreme Court work and codified it into law. So that is really exciting, and that's really great. Now, again, what happened over time was that No one sits down and say, great, we've solved this problem. Now we're going to build affordable housing. It's fantastic. No, there then becomes other things that bubble up that have the effect of really doing the same thing, which is excluding people and creating exclusionary zoning. And one of those things is called regional contribution agreements. So regional contribution agreements said that towns who had an obligation, and that's calculated, we'll talk a little bit about that, could sell to other towns their obligation. So, and about half of their obligation could be sold to another town. So, for example, an affluent town could sell to Newark their obligations. Newark got the money and Newark built their affordable housing, but the town didn't have to do it. So what do you think happened on that? Well, the white towns remained white and the affluent towns remained affluent. And we kind of put all the poor people in one area, right? And it wasn't just Newark. So that wasn't a good remedy, obviously. And so in 2008, the legislature passed an outlawing of RCAs because that didn't fix the problem, right? So just mentioning words that you might have heard. Okay, so let me just stop there. Is everybody, we're all rowing in the same direction? Everybody's good with this? Yep. Okay, just put it in the chat if you're not, I'll stop. So what happens is the way it's done is obligations are calculated every 10 years based on the census. How many people live in New Jersey? How many people have a lower income, a certain lower income? And then how many people, how much each obligation is. That's how it's done. We're in round 3. We're ending round 3 now, hence the legislation that's come up. So in 1985, when we passed the Fair Housing Act, I believe it was 1985, we passed something called COA, the Council on Affordable Housing, and the Council on Affordable Housing was charged with reviewing towns' plans to see if they were calculating, first of all, doing the calculation on their fair share, renewing their plans and passing their plans on how they were going to accomplish it, and other kind of data gathering information, like, how much money they were putting towards it and various other things. Along the way, we passed things like legislation that allowed towns to collect some tax that allowed them to pay. Not like a tax. It was sort of like once you built a fee, you're doing your building fees and you're building a house. Well, a little bit of that fee went to the town's, fund to create affordable housing, right? And it's called a municipal trust fund. So one of the things COA did also was it documented those municipal trust funds and if they were using them properly and things like that. So we had this process in place for the rounds and for the building of affordable housing. But again, we ran into problems with that because, nothing is perfect. You try things, you move forward, you take 2 steps forward, you take 1 step back, but you're still moving ahead. So the Council on Affordable Housing was challenged. It was challenged because, people got to the council and towns still didn't want to build their affordable housing. They didn't want their towns to change. And we hear that now, not my backyard. We can talk about that. But that it became a very ineffectual process. And to the point where it really wasn't passing. Many towns would submit their plans and they wouldn't get them approved. And so they were kind of stuck. And then what happened is, and under Governor Christie, and I remember this, under Governor Christie was facing a lot of challenges in the budget in New Jersey. right? And not his fault. I mean, he was strapped for funding. And he ran on, he knew people didn't like COA and affordable housing, and he ran on changing that, honestly, and he won. And in 2010, when he got into office, he issued an executive order to disband COA, right? Not replace it with something, a better process, but disband it. So, and really what he wanted and what he needed was the municipal trust funds. So what happened, and I remember getting in this fight and doing some, advocacy around it, is saying you can't take the trust funds. And really fun, what's really ironic about that is that point and that moment in time, the municipalities and the advocates were aligned because the municipalities weren't giving up their money, right? So that was really hard for him to really go through with that. And actually, of course, it goes into the courts again. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that. You can't take municipal trust funds. And so the towns retain the municipal trust funds, but it didn't make the process better. And for all intents and purposes, from that moment on, COA was defunct, essentially. Okay, here we are. I want to mention this report, and I'll give you the link to it. This is all documented in a really beautiful report that Fair Share Housing did, write, and it came out in 2023 because it was an anniversary, and it's really well written, and I would suggest you read it. I did send it out on the listserv when it came out. We're the only we're the only state in the nation to have such robust housing protections. We should be really, really proud of that. Even though we've done lots of other things, this is really a feather in our cap, and we should really be proud of this kind of justice work. And Fair Share Housing is a terrific organization. Okay, so where are we today? This is part of their slides that they did this. So today around the nation, 75% of residential housing in major U.S. cities is zoned still exclusively 75% for single family housing. Exclusionary zoning has significant impact on how successful people are, how healthy they are, and all of the above. So now where are we? Now we're coming into sort of the last 10 years, really. The Supreme Court ruled to transition in 2015 the enforcement of the Mount Laurel doctrine back to the courts because the code was so ineffectual, and we weren't in compliance with that law. The Supreme Court unanimously approved of the ruling. And so that ruling said that towns must work with Fair Share Housing and other interested parties to meet their obligations. And what ensued was a series of lawsuits, town by town, that because towns fought their obligations. They fought what Fair Share came up with the calculation in the third round. Towns said, no, that's not what I think is the right thing. That is not our obligation. And so Fair Share sued town sued Fair Share town by town. And that's what happened in 2015. And so during those lawsuits, there were lots and lots of arguments that came up about why the calculation was wrong and how we could exclude it. And I have a stake in that as executive director of Supportive Housing Association, because one of the arguments they made was that people of low income could, even with the affordability, and I'll say in a minute what that kind of looks like, could not afford to live in affordable housing. And they said, so we shouldn't count them. We shouldn't count them. And so that
And
eliminated all of people of disabilities that had low income. And so the Supportive Housing Association, my organization, right prior to I joining them, joined in the lawsuits as a friend of the court. And the court affirmed that, no, you've got to count them. So that's an important thing. Let me look at, there's a chat. Okay, Diane, please mute the other two. Okay, yes. Okay, let me just say, if everybody should be, muted, so please do that. If you're not, I'll find you and mute you myself. But thank you. Okay, so that's where we are. 2015, boom. Because of that, Fair Share started winning those lawsuits. And towns had and most towns now, I think it's up to 370 something towns have entered into settlement agreements with Fair Share. And some towns like Newark didn't really need to do a settlement agreement because remember, they had the RCA, overabundance of affordable housing. So they have very little obligation. And other cities, some cities, but most other towns have settled. They're down to it, and they have now to build affordable housing. They have to, and they've got the numbers. And that's why you see all this housing going up around you in every town, right? So since 2015, new deed restricted affordable units, 21,000, almost 22,000 have been built. So you see this happening. And just to give you a sense of what that meant and how different it is, you can see what was built in all of those years, right? 34 years, only 50,000 units were built. And in only 7 years, 21,000 were built because of those lawsuits, because there was nowhere to run on that. And when I talk about affordable housing, I'm talking about housing, and that's why I'm going to take a minute to think about the deed restrictions, okay? So, affordable housing is housing that is built, in my mind and the way I talk about it, with some kind of assistance. And for that money or assistance from the town, it could be land, it could be other things, they have agreed to make those housing units affordable for a term, a term, and usually at 30 years is generally the term, in exchange for the help, okay? And what affordable housing means in that regard is, to make it affordable, we look at the area median income of the town or the county, and we say a certain amount of that is lower than that. And so we adjust the rents based on that proportion in a calculation. So it could be 80% of the area median income. Lots of working people are 80% of the area median income. They still can't afford housing. Or 50% of the area median income. And most of the people that I work with, my organization serves, are people that are 30%, which is very low income, right? 20 or 30% of area median income. So affordable housing, you'll see housing built that has, rent that's adjustable. And that's how people are able to pay it. And still, can be still high. And I'll show you one of those forms, because now places have to publicize it. They've always had to publicize it, but now they have to publicize it electronically. And I will put one of these links in when I send that around. In the Housing Resource Center, has a that's an area under New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency. It's a search, and you can find affordable housing that way. That's one of the ways you can find it. And so it's all about those affordability and tons. Every week I get at least one, if not 4 or 5 units coming online. And you can see it's being built everywhere. It's really wonderful, wonderful what's happening. So I'm going to stop there for a minute before I go on. Okay. Okay. Any questions for a minute? Okay. I'll just a couple more stats. Since 2015, 57% of the units associated with the Mount Laurel were in higher income municipalities. So you see, we're spreading out the affordability for people. We're spreading out the opportunities for people, right? In areas with better schools, right? Better health outcomes and all of that. Let me just see what 29% of Mount Laurel associated units were in municipalities that were almost 80% white in the past. So it's wonderful what's happening in that, right? Okay, so I'm going to talk about today's legislation, but before I do that, I just want to show you, let me just pull up one of those housing things I was talking about. 1 second. Let me just get one because I think it'll really show you what we're talking about. This is not a good one. I picked not a great one. Okay. I might get a better one. Okay. Okay. Milburn. All right. So let me just show you what I'm talking about in terms of these things I get, these notices I get. And Affordable Homes Group is really another great website. And I'll point to in one of my links, we put together a document, and it's on our website that has a lot of these links for where to find housing. And I've also done a search housing webinar. I can also send you a link to that. So this is in Milburn, and this is current. And this is a new housing going up. And you can see the income, annual income of people and what they would be considered. And then you can see what the rents are here, what that's charged. So pretty good, actually. But you see, with very low income, and this is why they tried to use that argument, it's still $500 a month. If you're just on SSI, that's like $800 a month. You're not having much disposable income to be able, you're still cost burdened. So sometimes we combine affordable housing with rental assistance, and that really helps a lot. So anyway, this is the kind of housing that's being built. This is in Milburn, in our own backyard. And you can see the result of all these lawsuits, honestly. Okay, so let's talk about the legislation today and why this is important now. Okay, so as I said, we're done with we're almost to the end of our third round of let's calculate people's obligations. And that means a new round is starting. And that would be starting next year, right? And so what happened, and in New Jersey, we have a 2-year legislative cycle. So you introduce legislation, you have 2 years to pass it. And we ended our legislative cycle the end of the first week in January this year, and we started a new cycle January 9th. And what happens after the election, like after the November election in 2023, and before the January 5th or whatever that date was, is called lame duck. I don't know why. Somebody might know why it's called lame duck. But it's the time where just about anything can happen. And people who have legislation that have made it a certain way try to jockey to get that done before new legislators come in and things change. So lots of things happen, and there were a number of pieces of legislation that were concerning. One was bring back RCAs, the thing that didn't work and was basically racist and caused segregation. One of the things was delay the fourth round. Municipalities can't handle it. We're just catching our breath. Let's delay it. The other argument was bring back COA. Now everybody loves COA. It was ineffectual. Everybody hated it, but now they love it because, it's better than what we've got. No one wants the current process to continue. No one needs to have all of this in the courts all the time. It costs money. It's not effective, but it got things moving. So it was a decent process in that way. So, I was afraid, honestly, I was afraid that some of those other pieces of legislation were going to try to get passed. And so we were kind of waiting for that. But something surprising happened. And most of us didn't know what was happening. A couple people knew, fair share knew kind of it might happen. Because they recommended changes, but they were kind of sworn to secrecy. But the governor wants, the governors and the majority that's in place now really wanted to kind of get this settled so that we don't have a delay in this process, because it's cost us a delay and we're really behind the 8 ball. We have a huge gap in affordable housing because of all those years when nothing happened. So what they wanted to do was secure, that this continues. And so they tried very hard to think about a process that might work better. And they surprisingly knocked everybody over with the feather and introduced legislation the week before Christmas. I'm not kidding you, the week before Christmas. It wasn't even right after the November election. It was the week before Christmas, because if you wanna succeed quickly, go alone. If you wanna, I don't know, go with others, well, this was go alone, because they didn't want a lot of pushback. And they presented it. And so a lot of the advocates got, schooled in this legislation that was produced. And let me go back. Let me go down here. Let's just go to here. And we were trying to figure out what the heck the legislation was about. It was 70 pages. And pretty much what it was about, and I'll go through it, even though it didn't pass in lame duck. It officially disbands COA. It reaffirms the outlawing of RCAs, all good. It streamlines the process, because instead of having it in the courts, they've devised a new process. They said, and the way it is now, at least, is they said the Department of Community Affairs can do the calculation and recommend the municipal obligations. This is the current one right now. This is after 3 weeks of jockeying. The Department of Community Affairs will recommend it. If the town agrees, great. If they don't agree, there's a mediation process, so you don't have to go to court right away, saving money. If in mediation you agree, great. The town just has to, do whatever they do in their own town to say that this is what we're doing. If not, then you can go to courts, right? And that there will be 3 different court committees that will look at each group: South, Central, North. I forgot what they're calling them, that will look at that as a last resort. So the courts are still involved, but a lot less. There are other ways that you can agree on this, and the process moves forward, right? So it would reduce municipal spending. It codifies the obligation and the calculation. That's really important. And it talks about the calculation that was affirmed in the Supreme Court decisions that came up. And it's called the Jacobson methodology. It's by one of the judges, which all of these municipal obligations of late have followed. And it codifies that into law. Because again, I don't want you saying, don't count these people, okay? They can't afford it anyway, all right? So it does have a way of calculating that has been agreed upon, and it codifies that. It increases transparency, because there's a lot in the legislation that talks about what DCA will collect from the towns in terms of documenting their municipal trust funds and where they are and what they're spending money on. It documents their spending plans, how they're going to accomplish the affordable housing, where housing will be built, in what way it will be built. And their towns are supposed to post that information, but they don't. And so if you're a developer, if you're anybody and you're trying to look for it, it's really hard to find. So it does put a lot in place in this legislation that talks about it. It increases deed restrictions to 40 years, except for home ownership, which is 20 years, and incentivizes the bonus structure. So right now there's bonuses for creating affordable housing, and they're pretty robust in that if you did any rental housing, you were getting a bonus. So instead of a 1-to-1 unit, you were getting like 1.25 credit or some variation of that. Supportive housing is very excited because we've gotten a 2-to-1 credit, because no one wants to build supportive housing for people with mental illness or homelessness or even intellectual or developmental disabilities. They don't want to do that. So the only way supportive housing is getting built is if towns have a carrot, okay? And the carrot is bonus credits. So for every 1 unit of supportive housing you built, you get 2 credits. That's fantastic. So this legislation documents it. It thumbs it down in that we don't want you just, you should be building affordable housing. It's law. You don't get a bonus credit for doing rental housing, but you will get a bonus credit if there's a certain amount near transportation. The supportive housing one is the most robust. Go Diane. I'm very excited about that. But it does a few other things in terms of really helping to build the kind of housing we want and encouraging the kind of housing we want to be built. And that's good because it documents that pretty well. So those are some of the things that are really great about this bill, right? And, I'll say, Supportive Housing Association tried to fill the gap of the transparency of the municipal trust funds by hiring Fair Share. We got money from some banks gave us grants to go hire them and go collect the info. And we've gotten some of it, and it's on our website because we want it to be transparent, but it's really hard to collect that info because they don't want to give it to you. So this kind of tells that, and most importantly, probably, and I should have put on this legislation actually puts a timeline. It puts dates and times when the 4th round needs to happen. It tells you that the calculations have to be done by a certain date. Towns have to submit their plans by a certain date. It's got actual really deadlines on it so that we don't have this gap in it. So what happened how are we doing? I'm good. Okay. So what happened in December is this gets posted. Most of this was in place, although there was stuff we argued about. The week in December, I testified in the Assembly Housing Committee, along with many advocates. It passed. Then it was Christmas week, right? The week after, it was between Christmas and New Year's. We're all on calls trying to figure out what's the next step. The following week, last week of lame duck, it has to go to the Appropriations Committee. And it also has to be introduced to the Senate. The Senate wasn't agreeing exactly on the legislation that was proposed. So that was being done. It was being worked on. And the Thursday, January 4th, all traipsed down to Trenton to testify for the Appropriations Committee. And we wait there all day into the early evening, and they don't post the bill because the Senate they couldn't agree. And Senator Troy Singleton, who is amazing, said this. He said, I am committed to getting this done in the next session, but it is just too fast to pass it. It's too important to pass it. We were all uncomfortable. I was really uncomfortable with the speed because you didn't even have a chance to really look at it and to make sure you weren't doing some harm. And, it was really hard for me to get to everybody to say, is this going to hurt you if we say it this way? Because people were off. So that happened, and it wasn't terrible that it did. And true to his word, January 9th, he posted S50, a new version of this bill, which is kind of what I talked about. That bill was heard in committee yesterday. I testified yesterday, and it was passed. A4, its companion identical bill, is up on Monday in the Housing Committee again, and I will be in Trenton on Monday testifying. And then it has to go through the Appropriations Committee, and then it has to go to the full session. And I believe this is going to happen within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I believe it's going to be passed. But that's what's happening. And I will also put a link to the recording yesterday, because it's really, now that you've gotten this whole thing, I think you really kind of understand what they're, what's happening. You could hear them passionately speak about it. You could hear the detractors passionately speak about it. You can see the, really the skill at which Senator Singleton handles all of them and really listens to what they're saying and really affirms that it's not perfect, but it's a big step forward, and that he will work with them on making this better. It is, if nothing else, you should listen to it, because it's amazing. And so I will put that link in. It starts, the discussion of this bill starts about 20 minutes in. It's amazing. But I'm going to stop, and I want to ask questions. Oh, who sponsored it? I can tell you. Lopez, him in the Senate, Lopez and others in the Assembly. And I will also put a link. Okay. I will also put a link into, and it was in the invitation to hear. The link to the bill itself, the A4 and S50, is there in the link, but I'll give you the link anyway to the legislation. And a link to how to find your elected officials. If you want a call to action, I'd say sure. Have a call to action if you feel comfortable emailing your elected official and saying that because eventually they'll all have to vote. It's not just the committees. I support it, or I believe in affordable housing, or I'm happy about the affordable housing in my town, or whatever you want to say, please do, because it does matter. It does, because I don't know, I'd love to hear about what's happening in your towns, because I know in all towns they're fighting, people are still fighting this, and the arguments are, the schools are going to be overrun, there's no parking, it's going to change the character of my towns. But really what it is I don't want people living in my town that are low income and have problems. A lot of it is that. It's just, it is. Anyway, open. I'll take questions.
Diane,
Question?
can you talk, it's Marcia.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the what bonus credits are and what that incentive is for the town?
Yeah. So let's say a town has 100, their obligation is to build 100 affordable housing units. A bonus credit says for every unit, you get a credit for more than one. So let's say you build 20 supportive housing units, you'll get credit for 40. So that is incentive for a town. And it's not just supportive housing units that get credit. It's other kinds of units. I'm going to pull up a document that shows a little bit, let me save that. Let me see. Okay. There's a document that talks a little bit about the current credit structure, because it changed from the first version of the legislation in December to this. So let me just pull that up. And it's the summary of the changes, because it talks about bonus credits here. Okay. So it retained, and at first, the first version of the legislation had a supportive housing getting, I want to say it was 1.5 credits, but we argued that it really should stay the way it is right now, which is 2 to 1, and that was put back. So that's one of the things that changed. Or in the original legislation, it wanted it to be a 50-year deed restriction, and that means that it needed to be maintained as affordable for 50 years, and now it's 20, and it knocked down the home ownership to 20 years, and that's good because really you can't get people want to be able to move after 20 years. It should be sort of mirror a mortgage, and the whole idea of that is so people can use home ownership as a wealth incentive, right? And upping their wealth. So you wanted them to be able to sell it, right, at some point. So that was strange. That was good. It also talked about special needs housing in the original legislation narrowly, which is not the way it's being used now, even in the courts. So supportive housing is much broader. It includes, people in, that are affected by domestic violence. It includes youth aging out of foster care. It includes a broader list. And so it broadened the list of, it basically documented the broader list. And we have something called the Supportive Housing Trust Fund as a funding stream that New Jersey puts money into. And that came about, we got reinstated a couple of years ago. And that funding stream has a list. And we said, look at that list and use it basically, which is good. And in it talked about transitional housing, and this was a big deal, but it limits the amount of transitional housing that can get credit. And I'm curious to see what Mary Sundin thinks about that because she's in the homeless arena. But so we have a policy in New Jersey called Housing First that basically says we want to get people in permanent housing. And transitional housing is transitional. We want to minimize that in the process as much as possible to get people to permanent housing. And the question in here was not that you not have transitional housing, but that should you get bonus credits for transitional housing or should it be permanent? And that's what that means. Mary, do you have a comment on that? No, I guess maybe she stepped away, but most of the advocates we had probably had more discussion about this stupid thing than anything else. We kind of knocked it down to 5, but they made it 10, which is fine. No one's fighting it. It's fine. Okay. Let's see. Age restriction. Okay. So right now, there's a cap on how much age restricted housing you could use towards your credits, right? Not that you couldn't have more age-restricted affordable housing, but you can only use a certain amount of that towards your obligation because everybody would build senior housing and build nothing else. I'll just say that. Seniors are popular, right? So they limit what you could get credit for. And so it's still 25%. It didn't change. The original legislation was trying to up that. But what it did up was bonus credits. So right now, you can use your aging housing for 25% of your obligation, and you can get only 10% of that is eligible for bonus credits. So today in this legislation, it's still 25%, but 15% could be used to bonus credits. So it actually did improve it for aging. It just didn't make it a bigger percentage because 50% of your obligation has to go towards family housing. That's true now, and it affirms that. And then there's all kinds of deadline stuff that change. They actually put deadlines in it with dates and different things. So let's see, do we have credit? We have, okay, let's see. Okay. What is, okay, so did we answer the bonus credit question? Who determines who is on each town's committee, which, okay, so it's not the committee in the town that determines the need. It's a regional planning, it's the census, and then there's somebody who takes that calculation and looks like, and determines the need of the municipality or area. So that's the problem, is because the town will tell you it has no obligations. And the calculation will come up that it has 1,000 obligations. So somewhere in the middle is a compromise there. And it is, and I will say, there's a lot of fallacies going around that say, well, they give us these ridiculous numbers, but the town, when the negotiations have happened, they also look at how much land you have in the town to build, and how much it's not like we're saying, okay, you have to build things on top of the existing building, or if you have land that's really can't be built upon, it takes that into consideration, and that reduces your obligation, right? So the town has a say in that. They have a say in promoting what they feel is reasonable, and that, then they do the negotiation. Oh, that's a good question. I hope we aren't pitting people. How do you avoid pitting those who are low income against those who are disabled and need supportive housing? I don't pit them, because people who are disabled are low income by their disability and their income. So even someone with intellectual developmental disability who has a family, the family income, if they're an adult, the family income is not taken into consideration there. They're an adult, they have low income, that's why they're getting the housing, okay? So I don't think it's pitted against that. I think that, like I said, there is a rule in place that 50% of it has to be family housing. So right there, you're kind of limiting it. So then there's only a percentage. Hence, you don't want to put all these too many other caps, because then it really does limit it in a municipality's ability to make it work for them. I don't view it as a pitting against. I mean, I feel like we're really all aligned. I think the advocates, you'll see it in the testimony if you do listen to it, and I would highly recommend that you do. It's really, people are aligned with this. We all want affordable housing. Supportive housing doesn't get built without it being affordable. It's a cornerstone of supportive housing. So we've got other challenges, services, and all kinds of stuff that need to happen. But affordable housing is affordable housing. Okay. I hope I answered that. Are there requirements for diversity, age, disability, ethnicity, no ethnicity for each town? If not, are we likely to see a preponderance of one type of need being supported and other groups being further I don't think so. I mean, I haven't seen it. I think in our dialogue over Christmas and all of it, we really try to hash this out amongst ourselves and really work towards what was equitable for everybody and why. Hence the need hence a really robust discussion on that transitional housing and whether or not we want to have any credits for that, because it's not permanent, and does it belong here? And so we all agreed, on a certain amount that got credit, because we felt like we weren't there yet in building all the permanent housing we needed. And so homelessness would have been somewhat disenfranchised, because even though we know that's the best practice and that's a goal, it's not there yet. And so I think we are pretty aligned. Honestly, we are. So I don't feel like that. I don't feel like that. Oh, what's the period of time? And that's the deed restriction question. So right now it's 30 years. And that might change with the passing of this legislation. So to 40 maybe. How has it been in your towns? Are you seeing, not in my backyard? I know Summit, I know there's been a lot of challenges there, and people, faith community are coming together appalled at the challenges that what people are saying to keep it out. I think I'm not mischaracterizing that, but anybody else seeing similar arguments in their towns?
Diane, I don't know about arguments, but I found your explanation of why these complexes really are being built now.
Oh,
And
good.
we have one in Mountainside that's
Mhm.
quite big.
Yeah.
And there's still some land that is a part of a family. And so there's concern about what might happen with that. My husband is chairman of the planning board.
Oh my God! So he
And-
should have been here. Could have just
Well,
chimed in.
he had a commitment. He had a
Oh.
commitment. So I was delighted that this is being recorded.
Oh, okay.
Because I think
Well, I
it'll-
hope I didn't misstate it, but I think it's fair to say people are concerned. They see a lot of bigger developments going up. They're not all affordable. They're rental units, for people to live there. People who work, people who can't afford a home. So not everybody can be a homeowner. So they need someplace. Why should you have to rent 60 miles away from where you have to work? Because there is no affordability. I mean, we are fighting something that's been a practice that requires us to do some catch up, which is not always, easy. So you see these bigger developments, and really maybe 25% are affordable and the rest is market rate. So, but a town has some say in what they build. They do. But I drive around, I see a lot of vacant land. I tell you, there's a lot of vacant land. There are 9 million people living in New Jersey. It's like twice of Ireland. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people here. Where are they supposed to go? Should we tell them to move? I don't know the answer. I'm just saying. Oh, thank you. Well, we're coming up on 1. We are at 1. There's a lot more to talk about in terms of history and redlining and all of that. Look for the Justice Board to provide that leadership. I'm really proud to be part of that. I see some of the members on the call. We will be doing affordable housing, and we'll be having a Lenten book group. And you should get a notice from me by next week on that. On poverty by who's the guy who did eviction? Matthew Desmond. Thank you. That is a great book. Because poverty is complicated and housing is one piece of it. And so we thought it would be great to have a book group on that and kind of tackle that a little bit. So, okay. Sorry, I'm driving. Mary, as a rule, we prefer permanent housing over transitional housing. The need for permanent housing is great. Building transition housing instead kicks the can down the road and postpones the permanent solution. I agree, Mary. Yes, I agree. So yeah, that's true. That is true. So hence what we kind of came up with. But please, I will say, I'm going to send you all a list of links, and I'm going to send you this presentation, and hopefully Nine will post this. But if you have a chance to listen to the archive of the hearing yesterday, it's really, I know I'm a political junkie and passionate about this subject, but it's really interesting. Anyway, I highly recommend it, and also to watch a great state senator in action. He's really good. Anyway, thank you. Okay. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Diane. It was great.
Okay, good. If anybody wants to stay on and has more questions, I'm willing to do that. So, I'll just give it a few minutes. Hey, Bernadette.
Hi, Diane. It's Robert Lapine. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well.
Good.
Since you're the president of Affordable Housing Association here in New Jersey,
Mhm.
I'm sure you're very well aware of what's going on in Jersey City.
Wow, Jersey City is just exploding with gentrification and all kinds of stuff, right? Yes, that's a
Absolutely.
complicated one.
I live in a section of Jersey City where there are about at least 6, maybe 7 construction projects going on in our general area. I bump into my councilman on a daily basis. We have conversations, and they're just basically building luxury housing, luxury rentals. It's having an effect on the infrastructure.
Yeah, and it's having an effect on infrastructure, and it's having an effect on, and that's not all about affordable housing obligations.
It's not,
And it's not. And it's having an effect on, pushing people out. So
and
I
that's
think,
exactly what's going on.
yeah,
It's to the extent where it's almost crippling, not almost, but it's having a profound effect on transportation, parking. Path is not prepared to handle the amount of people that once they start living here are they're basically people who got pushed across the river,
mm,
for lack of a better word. And people keep saying this, and it's kind of distasteful. Jersey City has become New York City West.
yeah, it has.
And
And I'm wondering though, Robert, what you think about this, because I think things have slightly changed because of COVID, because I know a lot of people who work from home, and I know some people in Jersey City who work from home. So I wonder if the path, um, issue is maybe a little overblown, but I still think there's other problems. I think that they're pushing people out who live there and there's issues. But I'm wondering the infrastructure, sewer, all that stuff, I think has to be congestion. Everything has to be looked at.
and it is. They basically have ripped up the water pipes in the particular area that I live in at least 5 times, and has inconvenienced a lot of the people who have lived here. And the streets are horrible. There's more attention paid in certain areas of Jersey City and little to nothing paid in other places. Since basically the pandemic has leaned down, there are, people have gone back to taking the PATH train. And it was bad enough when there was no pandemic. The PATH train was overwhelmed by individuals coming from different parts of the state of New Jersey into Newark Penn Station.
Yeah.
And on a good day, if you were able to go ahead and wedge yourself onto the Newark to World Trade Center train, you happen to be lucky. And if you are able to go ahead and elbow your way into the train that's going into 33rd Street towards Midtown, you were lucky. And if you got a seat, even better. But the problem is that, yes, people are being pushed out. And there was a concerted effort going back, oh gosh, 3-4 years ago, where there were sections of Jersey City that had homes built, and people were told that you can't resell your house for 20 years. And
that is, yeah.
And that's great. And a lot of people were able to go ahead and purchase and move in. And unfortunately, the generational wealth, which is talked about on the Anti-Racism Commission, wasn't allowed to basically take place. And there were a swath of blocks that basically individuals came in with cash, and people thinking that they were getting money, a whole boatload of money, and not understanding the asset
restrictions of
value.
it, yeah,
You know, they took their offers and they moved out, and now those particular areas are being renovated, built up, and we're becoming a different type of atmosphere, so to speak.
right.
And places where you think you needed to have a police presence previously now has a patrol vehicle sitting every other block.
Oh,
And it's kind of distasteful. It's kind of I don't know. It's a smack in the face to the people who grew up here in Jersey City. And you know, I moved out to Jersey City 30 years ago. I was born and raised out in Queens.
oh, me too, Astoria.
And when I came over here, I saw Jersey City as an urban suburb, so to speak. And then over the years, it's just basically has blown up. And unfortunately, the mayor, who is currently the
Bullock,
mayor of
who's
Jersey
gonna
City,
run for governor,
who's looking to go ahead and run for governor,
I know.
is, you know, if you really look at how he has done his practice here, tax rates have gone up tremendously. And people can't afford to go ahead and pay the taxes.
I think there's other legislation being passed and a couple to deal with some of those issues.
Mm-hmm.
And what Singleton said, I mean, there's a couple I'll look at that actually were passed yesterday that were positive towards
Right.
say something about what you're talking about. But what Singleton also, as these things came up in the hearing, said this legislation does not do everything. This legislation does this,
Mm-hmm.
but we're going to work, and I'm committed to work on these other things, which is a good thing. So happy to, yeah.
And that's the hope, and that it's out there. I'm just kind of worried about what happens come 2025. And he
with the new,
runs.
well, you know, theoretically, the affordable housing obligations for Jersey City should be next to nothing because they have a lot of you know, they have enough from the RCAs and from that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be because of that's happening to Jersey City. It's not. Jersey City, you know, became more than Hoboken. You know,
Yes.
it became the yuppie Mecca of the world. That's an old-fashioned saying now, yuppie.
Right.
But you know
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean.
Yeah, downtown Jersey City in the Newport, you know, all of the downtown areas basically have built up, and they basically, in a nutshell, they basically have overbuilt, which is the reason why it's now floating west into Journal Square area where I live. Like, you know, like I said, six or seven construction sites going on, and that includes the new courthouse that's being built here, the county courthouse. And it's spreading into Kearney, spreading into Harrison.
It is. It is.
And other parts of Hudson
The good
County.
news is, I'll tell you this, we've had this terrible, because of the pandemic and everything else and all the home sales and yada, yada, you know, rents have skyrocketed. No one could afford it. People with rental vouchers can't find a unit. It's terrible, but it has slowed. And one antidote to the slowing, separately from what I'm just saying, is that if you build more affordable housing, rent comes down. There's more supply.
And unfortunately, it's not happening.
It's not happening fast enough. That's for sure. But it is slowing. It is slowing. And hopefully it'll just, Bernadette, do you have a question?
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm listening. Keep
Oh, okay.
the conversation
Okay. If
going.
anybody else has a question, I just don't want to, you know.
I don't want to monopolize.
No, you're
this
good. I mean,
time
this
here.
is all true. This is all a piece of a bigger issue. That's why when I thought about doing this today, I'm like, oh my God, you've got to concentrate because it's so big. Anyway,
Mhm.
you know,
because with all of these units that are going up, blocks that didn't have anything on it, now we'll have, if it's like 40 units in a building, 80 units a building, you're talking at least 2 people. And if they have kids, we're talking a number, at least 300 new residents to a particular area where, and this is really the big point of it, parking is going away. Although
Didn't I
new-
name all the things people
Yeah,
have challenges?
Yeah,
It's
although
exactly
new
what they
units
say.
are required to go ahead and provide parking.
Mhm.
Basically, basically what they're doing, they're charging their residents $300-400 a month just to park their car, despite the fact that they are paying upwards of $4,000 per month for the unit that they're living in. So it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
And-
it's
and
a
it's
challenge. It
overloading
is.
the
And even
schools,
if your
overloading
heart's
the
in the right
infrastructure.
place and you believe in affordable housing, you believe in that, you still challenge sometimes. And this is the way I look at it. All you can do is say, okay, we know as a premise, this is a good thing, but this is the challenges. And then work on things to adjust to the challenges and deal with these challenges and not push them under the rug because and that one of the reasons why I was wasn't unhappy that it didn't pass so quickly is because that will be a backlash if you shove something through
Yeah,
and you haven't examined it and you haven't let people say then it's just going to come back to bite you. And I just think it's better today that we had a few more weeks and are still talking about it, honestly, as much as I wanted it to happen.
yeah. And I've been, oh gosh, over the last, I've spent 17 years working as an HR person for